Wonderful. Well, hi, Stephanie. It is such a pleasure to host you today on the SCI podcast. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm very excited to get started on some of the topics of conversation we have prepared for today. So, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself briefly.
Sure. Thank you, Anna, for the invitation to come join you on the podcast. I'm glad that we connected because we have similar interests, which is to help people uh, resolve conflict, obviously, in a way that helps preserve the relationship. So I have a doctorate degree in communication. I've taught public speaking classes. I also have a master's in dispute resolution, and I decided to combine my three passions and work together and create what I call the triangle effect. And the first is my passion for communication. I enjoy helping people face their fear of public speaking. It's a win-win situation because I get to see people go from a place of fear to a place of strength. And so that's one thing that I do. And then the second area that I'm also interested is helping people walk through the fear of resolving conflict and get into the zone, what we call the zone of neutrality, where once we're in the zone, they're able to think and help come up with solutions and find a way to help preserve the relationship. So I'm helping them through, I believe, through conflict resolution and especially mediation, there's the opportunity to help people learn how to face the fear as opposed to fighting it or becoming aggressive towards the situation, and also face the fear of not running from it and fleeing from it. And then finally, the reason is why sports, because of the fact that I have seen the value of public speaking in the sports industry. I also am launching and entering the field of conflict resolution in the sports industry. And I think that the sports mediation is an opportunity to combine both aspects. And the reason I say that is because of the fact my background in sports, I actually became an athlete later on in life, having done triathlons, and also I faced a fear and conquered the mountain with a ride to Rwanda, mountain biking trip. And what we did, it was a fundraiser to raise funds for the cycling club in Rwanda. I also really, what inspired me to work with athletes was the fact that I saw an athlete dressed very well, standing at a podium and flustering and flubbing through his professional presentation. And it was at that point that I realized there is a need. Like, this athlete doesn't have the public speaking skills. And so I believe that I can help. And so that's where the opportunity came to combine the two. I also have worked 2 years in the sports industry, having worked in customer service and sales for 2 MLB teams. So that's where my passion and the desire to help people in the sports industry improve their communication and resolve their conflict.
This is wonderful, and thank you for the introduction. And you're so right, right? You can have all the confidence in the world if on your field, court, whatever sport you practice, but when you step up into the professional career, you don't really know how to deliver yourself well. And I think what you are doing and what you're focusing on is crucial because it does help athlete to just develop outside of the sport. And I think here it's interesting because it's a student athlete, right? So they're not full on athlete, they're not athlete students. And it's also very important to accentuate on the kind of education that we can give to those students outside of their sport. So I would love to, talk a little bit about how you see mediation when it comes to creating win-win championships and team cohesion, and just some of the benefits that you have witnessed throughout your career.
Thank you, Anna. And I agree with you, especially in the student athlete. I have worked with student athletes, teaching them communication skills and improving their public speaking. And I agree that's where the win-win comes through. And I see them as having championship attitudes. They're willing to excel. They're willing to practice. And the reason I see mediation as a championship opportunities for the parties is because I looked at the term champion. I was curious, what does this word champion mean? And I looked and found out that it actually relates to a story years ago, centuries ago, that is connected to David and Goliath. And David was Goliath, who was 7 feet tall, was considered a champion. And what champion meant in his time, and this is, we're talking about where battles were fought with swords and spears, and not so much gunfire like we have today in drones and nuclear war and so forth. What they did is a champion would actually stand between two armies. And what that meant is that both armies, when they were getting ready to go to battle, they would choose one person from each side, and the two of them would literally battle it out. And then through that would determine the winner. And then that would then also save the troops from having to lose more men fighting and warriors fighting. And I see that same attitude in the championship of sports mediation, because of the fact that what it is that mediation becomes a champion of standing between the two armies. And the mediator is a third neutral party who brings two people together, who both, as we know, volunteer and mutually agree. And this third party is the person who is allowing the opportunity to have them listen and discuss and address their issues so that they both come away as winners. And I think that's the one nice thing about mediation. We know that mediation comes about through mediation is the opportunity for people to be involved, have the voice, and be involved in the decision-making process, the outcome. And so I think that's why mediation is so important. And oftentimes in sports, it's easy to come away with the competition attitude of winner versus loser. But mediation actually is where I mentioned earlier, creates two winners, and it creates a sense of collaboration. It also, from a communication point of view, allows the voice to be heard, that each party has the opportunity to express their concerns and work through it, as opposed to having someone else make the call. They're the ones who are deciding the factors and the outcome.
Super interesting. And I wanted to just go back to your experience with MLB and now your experience more in the collegiate setting. Have you found many differences in the approach when it comes to conflict between, university athletics versus a professional league? And do you reckon that universities need to apply more mediation to their current departments, their current practices, or do you think, and vice versa with the professional teams?
Thank you. I do see a difference, and the difference has to do with the NCAA, what can help prevent conflict, because the rules are so specific that oftentimes if they are broken, then sanctions are put through. And so that's why it's important to address. I agree that even though they have sanctions and compliance, what happens though is that the conflict will still brew. And
Yeah.
I definitely see conflict and resolution and mediation definitely being a valuable asset for sports teams, because nowadays with the transfer portal and NIL, if a player isn't happy, with the coach, it becomes public. I've often seen and heard the stories of witnessing also the conflict unfolding in the media, as opposed to, hey, we're disagreeing, let's have this talk about, let's find someone who will listen to us and come to an agreement. I think that's where sports mediation can come about, and it could easily just be about conflict coaching. How do you coach through a situation? Whereas in MLB, I think they're at the professional level, there is more an opportunity for conflict to be resolved through negotiation and through agents. Now, I recognize that some players at the college level have agents already, or they're connected with a collective or a sports agency. So they could have someone represent them too. But I think at the most part, everything is more, it happens at the interpersonal level and the conflict, especially in college athletics.
Yeah, absolutely. And following up on that, I'd love to just discuss a little bit how, in your experience, student athletes face conflict and some of the fears they have when it comes to expressing that conflict or mitigating through it.
Mhm. Thank you. One of the areas where I find that athletes are afraid to express their thoughts in creating conflict is they are afraid of retaliation. If
Mm,
they
yeah.
voice their opinion or share their thoughts, they don't want to be benched. So they will stay quiet. And what interestingly happens that if the conflict isn't resolved, it has an impact on the performance of the team. First of all, and I say that because the conflicts can brew between players, and
Mhm.
in that player issue, it's like it's an undercurrent that runs through the team. And so if it isn't addressed, then it comes out in the playing field, and also it comes out in the morale of the team. It creates division instead of unity. And it's interesting, I think oftentimes we think of it's the games are lost because of a lack of skill or performance, but in reality, games are also lost because of the lack of connection and communication. You know, when players, especially like in football, when there's a contact, they need to be able to have even just the slightest move, or you make eye contact, head gesture, anything like that can help create that, and can create that connection that can resolve the conflict. And I also think that what conflict does for student athletes, it definitely creates that spirit of fear, and it creates that hesitancy. And so they're not performing at their best because of that. And I also, we're talking about student athletes, and also see that it's starting even in the high school level too, because, you know, high school students want to get into Division I schools. And so they experience conflict on their teams, conflict oftentimes with student athletes at high school. They're caught between their coach and their parents, you know, and having the different perspectives that also sometimes need to be resolved. So I think the fact that they're afraid to address conflict with student athletes is one of the biggest reasons there still exists conflict.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And I was privy to a lot of information to do with that. I did my graduate research on how name, image, and likeness affects team cohesion and team trust. So
Yes.
I did some research on college football between some of the larger programs and some of the smaller programs. And now, you know, with revenue share and NIL and all of the benefits that you know, college athletics now have, how does different financial, you know, opportunities impact those players? Like we have the quarterback making millions, and then the tight end, you know, getting, I don't know, a scooter for the season or whatnot. You know,
Right.
it's, of course it's an example, but you're so right about how, you know, locker room dynamics, if they are affected by unresolved conflict, can then translate in the performance of the team. And I'm a huge advocate, and everyone at SCI, we're very big believers in that there is a way to prevent that conflict happening in the first place, and that athletic departments need to be looking at frameworks to implement, and also most importantly to teach players and coaches how to handle conflict. And
Right.
in your practice when it comes to dispute resolution and communication, it's aligns perfectly with the mission that we have here, and that, you know, we need to remember that these are student athletes, student
Right.
first.
Exactly. And I appreciate you recognizing that, because of the fact that the student aspect, and they're doing they are completing and competing, doing two jobs. The
Yeah.
first is their academics, and the second is their sports. And especially at the Division I level, the sports can be highly intense. And so they have the internal conflict of, okay, what comes first? You
Mhm.
know, and usually student athletes like to excel. They want to win not only on the field, they also want to win in the classroom too. And I think another area where conflict comes in for the student athlete is what I call intrapersonal communication, which is their own personal dialogue. And because of that, I have experience having worked with student athletes in the classroom, how it can lead to low self-esteem, it can lead to anxiety, and it can also create um, causes depression because they feel so much there's this need to excel in both areas and be perfect in both areas. And when they're not, or it sometimes can be difficult for them to adjust. And I think that's why it's important to recognize the value of both and have students, the athletic departments and the academic departments work together to help support it. Now, I will say this, that's in one part, something that's a barrier in the academics and athletics working together can be the NCAA compliance guidelines, because faculty are not allowed to have too much communication with the players and create bias and so forth like that. So they often have athletic programs have really great academic advisors who become liaisons for the athlete and then also for the faculty member. So those are some things that I have noticed with the conflicts that student athletes experience from a classroom perspective.
Have you noticed any stress among athletes when it comes to having their place in the roster as well as the scholarships, right? So they have to maintain certain level of academic, excellence as well as, perform well on the sports team. So as you said, it's a two-man's job. And how do you find athletic departments as well as some of the advisors can help students, achieve success in both areas without burning them out, but they're constantly stressed about performing in two areas. And I think it's very important to highlight how that could be difficult when you're 18, 19, 20 years old.
Yes, I agree with you. And I have been impressed with the work that I have seen advisors do, because they have, what I've learned at the university where I taught, they have academic advisors and then they have their athletic advisors. And oftentimes they will go to their athletic advisors for the academic aspects as well. And also just for life issues too, because it's the first time someone is going to meet with them one-on-one in order to be able to address it. And I think they become a safe person. The athletic advisors become safe people for the athletes in a place where they can open up and share what is going on. And I've had that experience when there have been issues with student athletes in class that I would call the advisor and say, hey, I just want to let you know what's going on here. And they'll say there's a lot going on in their personal lives that they're also addressing. So now you've got academics, you've got athletics, and then you've got personal life. It could be a family member, who is ill, or it could be, a problem with their roommate or their parents getting a divorce. There's so many aspects that can impact the students, that student athletes, that the advisors really are a great support team for them. And I think they don't get the recognition that they really do, because they are the people who are making a positive difference in the athletes and helping them succeed in the classroom.
Absolutely. And, looking beyond collegiate athletics, not everyone wants to go to be drafted or go to the Olympics. Some people will end their careers there, but if you don't teach the essential skill set to the young athletes when it comes to communication and public speaking and, being able to present yourself beyond your sport, that's why we have, so many emerging organizations that actually cater to those needs. And I think that's really, really important. And I love what you're doing in the space. And I think your, the three pillars of dispute resolution and communication in the sports ecosystem is gonna be, so highly used for generations to come, because conflict is going to happen whether we want it or not. I think it's about teaching everyone how to work through it. So I admire your practice, and I think I would love to hear maybe just a few last pointers that you could give, a few recommendations to the students, and also some of the upcoming practitioners that are considering work in that space?
I think I would say for the athletic schools and the student athletes themselves, it's important to recognize that we are dealing with individuals who are coming together as a team, and recognize each individual has a different way of communicating and responding and performing. I like the work that SCT does, and that is with the sports orientation of the disc profile, because it helps realize that if we understand that people are different, okay, so I can be more dominant and I can be more of an influence, or I can be more steady. That doesn't mean we're bad people. There needs to be, I'm right and you're wrong. We can learn to understand each other. So I think recognizing the individuals as part of the team is a great opportunity, and advice that I would encourage people to people in this collegiate level to consider is, let's look at the people, and let's look at their personalities, and let's look at also their point of views, because having different point of views to come about it can also lead to conflict as well. So I think those are some areas. And for practitioners who want to go into the field of working in college athletics in an area of conflict, I would encourage them to learn more about NCAA compliance also, which they probably already do. And I just think it's also important, though, to help practitioners realize the people aspect first. It's not the people. The people are not the problem is the problem. So let's work on separating out the two so we can help the people come together and resolve the conflict. Thank you, Anna, for asking such great questions during this time.
Thank you, Stephanie, for sharing your perspective and sharing your background. It's truly a rewarding space that we are in, and it has been such a pleasure to get to know you a little bit. And we are looking forward to following you on your path, and will be a support to your upcoming endeavors. So thank you once again, and we will be in touch.
Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you. Bye, Stephanie.
Bye.